Here we're asked to graph this cosine function, and what we're going to do to start us off, there's no labeled axes here, so I'm going to start by finding the midline, the maximum, and the minimum before I start plotting anything. First of all, I know the midline is equal to the k value, so the middle is going to be at 1. The maximum and the minimum is just whatever the k value is plus or minus the amplitude. So looks like my a value is -1, meaning my amplitude is 1, the distance between the midline and the maximum and the minimum. So my maximum here is going to be 1 above that, which is at 2, and my minimum 1 below the midline at 0. So that's going to help us out to find what I want to label these y-axis as. Looks like this one's going to be 1, 2, and 3. And again, this one here, I know my midline is going to be at 1. Here's going to be my max. Here's going to be my minimum. So it's going to be a little bit squeezed down. And let's talk about the starting point next. So my starting point is going to be told by two things. The h value, which it looks like is at -2. So I'm going 2 to the left. Again, it looks like I'm probably going to want to go by ones here. -1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we might add on to that. And we can change it if we need to. But h value of -2. And then this is a negative cosine. So if you remember the general shape of a negative cosine, that starts at the minimum and ends at the minimum for a single period. So what that means is that I'm going 2 to the left, and then it's going to start at my minimum, which I know is at 0. So there is my starting point. Next, we're going to find the period by doing 2 pi over b. Looks like my b value is 2 pi over 5. So 2 pi over 2 pi over 5, and that looks confusing, so let's change it to a division problem, which is 2 pi divided by 2 pi over 5, which is just like multiplying by the reciprocal. And look at that, 2 pi's cancel out. That tells me that my period is 5 units. So that tells us that I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and end here at 3. So that actually tells me my ending point, because I know my starting and my ending point are both at the minimum because it's a negative cosine. Next, we got to do the distance between all of our reference points. And basically, in that one, all we're doing is dividing this graph up into 4 pieces. So 5 divided by 4 is just an ugly fraction of 5/4. So I'm going to kind of estimate my x values here because I'm starting at -2 and I'm going up by 5/4, so about there. And then I'm going up another 5/4, which is about there. And then another 5/4 is, let's say, about there. And then another 5/4 I know is landing me exactly on 3. So that tells me the x values of my reference points. And now I just use the general shape, knowing that if we look back up at the top right here, we're starting at the minimum, then my next reference point goes through the midline, then to the maximum, back to the midline, and then my minimum. So going to plot those points here on my graph and sketch that graph. And that's a single period of our graph. Again, this kind of like goes up and does some other stuff, but I'm not super worried about you continuing it perfectly because I'm looking mostly at those 5 reference points and that one period. So there's our graph.